I guess Grandpa finally stopped feeling sorry for Ethan. Daniel didn't even lower his voice. The words hit me before I reached the front row of the funeral chapel. People turned toward him, then toward me, pretending they hadn't heard. My father simply adjusted his tie. My mother avoided my eyes. Nobody defended me. I swallowed the lump in my throat and sat down. I wasn't here for money. I was here to bury the only person who had ever made me feel like I belonged. After the service, everyone followed Olivia Brooks, Grandpa's lawyer, into the conference room. Nobody talked about memories. Nobody talked about love. They only talked about the will. Daniel leaned back in his chair with a confident smile. "This won't take long," he said. "Grandpa always knew who should lead." Dad nodded. "I raised you for this." Mom smiled proudly. "I know your grandfather made the right decision." I stared at the polished table. Not one of them asked how I was holding up. Olivia cleared her throat. "William Carter's last will and testament will now be read." The room became silent. She began listing businesses, commercial buildings, investment accounts, vacation homes, and company shares. Each one ended the same way. To Daniel Carter. Daniel's smile grew wider every minute. Dad looked like he had already won another lifetime of success. Mom reached over and squeezed Daniel's hand. "Your grandfather believed in you." Then Olivia paused. She looked directly at me. My heart started racing. "The remaining personal inheritance," she said quietly. I finally looked up. "Is distributed as follows." I held my breath. To Ethan Carter. For one impossible second, hope filled my chest. No financial assets are assigned under page 1 of this will. Everything inside me collapsed. I couldn't even breathe. Dad let out a satisfied sigh. I expected that. Mom looked at me with cold disappointment. Maybe Grandpa finally saw who deserved his legacy. Daniel laughed softly. "No hard feelings, little brother." Then he stood. "I promise I'll protect everything Grandpa built." Everyone applauded. Actually applauded. It felt like they weren't celebrating an inheritance. They were celebrating losing me. I pushed my chair back. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody even noticed I was leaving. Outside, I wiped my eyes before anyone could see the tears. I reached my car and searched my pockets for my keys. "Ethan." I turned. Olivia hurried toward me, holding a large sealed envelope against her chest. She glanced behind her before speaking. "I've been waiting for you." I frowned. "What is it?" She handed me the envelope. "Your grandfather left strict instructions." I stared at the elegant handwriting across the front. "My name. Nothing else." "I don't understand." "You aren't supposed to." Her voice became even quieter. "He told me to give this to you only after they finished celebrating." A chill ran through me. Celebrating what? She looked toward the building where I could still hear laughter through the open doors. "You." I blinked. "They think they won today," she whispered. I looked back at the envelope. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Olivia stepped away. "Don't open it here." "Why?" "Because if your grandfather was right?" She stopped herself. "Everything changes after you read what's inside." Before I could ask another question, she walked back toward the building. I stood alone beside my car. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Slowly, I broke the seal. There was only one sheet of paper. Only 4 words. "Read page 2 alone." My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I unfolded the paper. I expected another goodbye. Instead, I saw my grandfather's handwriting. "If you are reading this, Ethan, your family failed their final test." I read the sentence again. Failed? My chest tightened. There was another folded document behind the letter. Across the top, stamped in blue ink, were the words. "Certified copy, page 2 of the last will and testament of William Carter." I whispered, "What is this?" My grandfather's letter answered me. Page 1 was never the end. It was a mirror. I needed to know who would value you more than my money. I swallowed hard. If your parents defended you, destroy page 2. If they celebrated your exclusion, activate it immediately. I closed my eyes. They hadn't defended me. They had applauded. I unfolded the legal document. Every line made my heartbeat louder. "All controlling voting rights of Carter Holding Company, previously transferred into the Carter Legacy Trust, belong exclusively to Ethan Carter upon activation of page 2. I froze. I whispered, "No." I kept reading. The businesses. The board. The future of the company. None of it truly belonged to Daniel. Grandpa had quietly transferred control years ago. Daniel had inherited wealth. I had inherited authority. My phone suddenly rang. "Olivia." I answered immediately. "What is this?" I asked. "It's real," she said without hesitation. "I don't understand." "You weren't supposed to until today." Why didn't Grandpa tell me? Because he wanted honest choices, not rehearsed ones. I leaned against my car. They celebrated. I know. My own parents. I know. I struggled to breathe. Olivia's voice became serious. Listen carefully. Don't tell anyone about page 2. Why? Because someone already tried to access your grandfather's confidential legal files. My stomach dropped. When? Less than an hour after the funeral. Who? I don't know. Did they steal anything? No. Then why are you worried? She paused. Because whoever it was knew page 1 wasn't the whole story. A cold chill ran through me. So someone else suspects this exists. Exactly. I looked at the papers again. What do I do? Hide them. And Daniel? Let him celebrate. That evening I couldn't resist turning on the business news. Daniel stood behind the Carter Holding logo, smiling into a wall of cameras. Our family is entering a bold new era, he announced. I promised to honor my grandfather by leading this company forward. Reporters applauded. I almost laughed. He sounded so confident. He had absolutely no idea he couldn't legally control a single board vote. My phone buzzed again. A text from Marcus. You okay? I typed 3 words. Not even close. Then I looked back at Grandpa's letter. At the bottom, beneath his signature, he had written one final sentence. Power reveals character faster than poverty ever will. I folded everything carefully and hid the documents inside my backpack. For the first time that day, I felt something stronger than heartbreak. Hope. But hope came with fear. If someone had already gone looking for page 2, how long would it take before they started looking for me? I drove home without turning on the radio. Every set of headlights behind me seemed to stay a little too close. I changed lanes. The same black SUV changed lanes. I turned onto another street. It followed. My pulse pounded as I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Whoever was inside wasn't trying to pass me. They were following me home. The black SUV disappeared the moment I pulled into a crowded gas station. I waited 5 long minutes. It never came back. My hands still trembled as I drove home. I locked every door, closed every blind, and placed Grandpa's letter inside a small fireproof safe. I should have felt powerful. Instead, I felt completely alone. The next morning, I called my father. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. Then my mother. Silence. I even texted Daniel. Can we talk? His reply came almost instantly. There's nothing left to discuss. Move on. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. They hadn't only erased me from the will. They had erased me from the family. For the next few days, every business headline featured Daniel. New leader of Carter Holding. Daniel Carter announces bold expansion. Family friends flooded social media with congratulations. One comment hurt more than all the others. William Carter made the right choice. Nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew page 2 existed. Marcus knocked on my apartment door before I could sink any deeper. You look terrible, he said. I feel worse. He walked inside without waiting for permission. You've barely answered my calls. I didn't want to talk. So you wanted to suffer alone? I looked away. I lost my family. You lost people who stopped acting like family a long time ago. His words stung because they were true. I still wanted them. I know. I kept thinking if I worked harder. Ethan. He cut me off. You spent your whole life trying to earn love that should have been free. I couldn't answer. You know what your grandfather saw? What? He saw someone worth believing in. I laughed bitterly. Then why do I feel like the biggest failure in the city? Because your heart still wants parents. That sentence broke me. I buried my face in my hands. I don't even care about the company anymore. Good. I looked up. What? Marcus smiled. Then build your own. My own what? Your own future. I shook my head. I don't have investors. We'll find them. I don't have clients. We'll earn them. I don't even know where to start. You start by believing your last name isn't your greatest asset. His confidence felt stronger than my fear. For the first time since the funeral, I nodded. Okay. 1 week later, we rented the smallest office either of us had ever seen. It barely held 2 desks. Marcus grinned. Headquarters. I laughed for the first time in days. The following afternoon, a woman walked through the open door carrying a laptop. I'm Sophia Bennett. I stood. You must be here about the consulting position. She smiled. I'm here because Marcus told me your story. I felt embarrassed. Then you know I'm a mess. No. She shook her head. I know you're someone who refused to become bitter. You barely know me. I know enough. You aren't worried about my family? I'm interested in your vision. Not your last name. Not your inheritance. My vision. Those words gave me something I hadn't felt since Grandpa died. Hope. As we began planning our first project, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. This is Ethan. A calm older voice replied. My name is Victor Hayes. I recognized it immediately. Grandpa's oldest business friend. I believe your grandfather asked me to keep one final promise. I stood frozen. We need to meet, Victor said quietly. Alone. I've been waiting 10 years to have this conversation. Victor Hayes didn't even shake my hand before saying it. I stared across the small meeting room. 10 years? He nodded. Your grandfather made me promise I wouldn't contact you until the right moment. Why now? Because now you've been tested. I leaned forward. I don't understand. Victor smiled sadly. You think William Carter built an empire by trusting luck? I stayed silent. He watched people. He opened a leather folder and slid several papers toward me. I looked down. My first internship. My first scholarship. My first consulting contract. Every opportunity that had changed my life. What is this? I asked. Your grandfather arranged every introduction. I looked at him in disbelief. No. Yes. I earned those. You did. He pointed toward the papers. He opened doors. You walked through them. I felt my throat tighten. He never wanted you to know. Why? Victor folded his hands. Because he wasn't testing your intelligence. He was testing my character? Victor nodded. Every recommendation came with one instruction. What instruction? If Ethan ever asks for special treatment because he's a Carter, close the door. I couldn't speak. Victor continued quietly. You never asked. I looked at Grandpa's old signature on one document. He believed in me. He believed in the man you would become. For the first time since the funeral, I smiled without forcing it. Victor reached into his briefcase again. This is for your company. He handed me a funding proposal. The amount made my eyes widen. You want to invest? I want to partner. Why? Because your grandfather asked me to. There has to be a condition. There is. I looked up. You will never use the Carter name to win business. I answered immediately. I don't want it. Victor smiled. Good. People will choose us because of our work. Exactly. He extended his hand. Then we have a deal. I shook it. At that moment, I felt like I was finally building something that truly belonged to me. Later that afternoon, Marcus nearly shouted when I told him. This changes everything. Sophia laughed. I told you people would eventually see what I saw. I grinned. We're still going to have to earn every client. Marcus pointed toward the proposal. Now we actually have a chance. While our tiny office buzzed with excitement, another office across town was beginning to fall apart. James Holloway quietly stared at his computer screen inside Carter Holding. His message to Daniel had gone unanswered all morning. He finally walked into Daniel's office. We have a problem. Daniel barely looked up. It can wait. No, it can't. Daniel sighed. What now? I'm seeing financial records disappear from the company servers. Daniel closed the folder in front of him. I authorized some restructuring. James frowned. This isn't restructuring. What is it? Missing files. Daniel stood. You worry too much. I'm serious. So am I. Daniel walked toward the window. When I'm finished with my expansion plans, nobody will remember a few missing documents. James looked uneasy. I don't think you understand how dangerous this is. Daniel smiled confidently. I understand power. James left without another word. Hours later, Daniel sat across from a group of aggressive investors. A thick contract rested on the polished table. One investor smiled. Congratulations, Mr. Carter. Daniel picked up the pen. I know exactly what I'm doing. Without reading the final page, he signed the agreement. Far across the city, my phone buzzed. Olivia's name appeared on the screen. I answered. Her voice sounded urgent. Ethan, Daniel just signed something that could destroy your family's company. Daniel just signed something that could destroy your family's company. Olivia's warning echoed through my head long after the call ended. I wanted to tell myself it wasn't my problem anymore. But it still carried my grandfather's name. And that made it hurt. The next week, business headlines changed overnight. Carter Holding takes massive risk. Investors question new leadership. Debt concerns grow after aggressive expansion. I stared at the articles without feeling happy. I didn't want my family to fail. I only wanted them to stop pretending I had. Marcus looked over my shoulder. You still care. I wish I didn't. You can't turn love off like a light switch. I sighed. I know. Meanwhile, my phone refused to stop ringing. Potential clients. New partners. Companies asking for meetings. Sophia walked into my office holding a thick folder. You should sit down. Why? She placed the contract in front of me. They accepted our proposal. I blinked. Our first international client? She smiled. They signed this morning. Marcus threw both hands into the air. We actually did it. I laughed in disbelief. No family connections. No favors, Sophia added. No Carter name, Marcus said proudly. I signed the final page with shaking hands. For the first time in years, my success belonged only to me. News spread quickly. Business blogs covered our contract. Industry leaders began mentioning my company alongside firms much older than ours. Then came an invitation. The National Innovation Summit. I was scheduled to attend as a guest. When I arrived, hundreds of executives filled the ballroom. I wasn't looking for trouble. Trouble found me. Daniel walked over with my parents beside him. He smirked. I didn't know guests could wander into executive events. I stayed calm. I received an invitation. I'm sure you did. Dad folded his arms. You should enjoy the free food while you can. Mom smiled politely. Some rooms aren't meant for everyone, Ethan. The old pain returned for a moment. Then Daniel laughed. So tell me, how's your tiny office doing? Before I could answer, several nearby executives turned toward us. The conversation had become public. Daniel raised his voice. I guess pretending to be successful is easier than actually becoming successful. A few people chuckled awkwardly. I felt every eye in the room watching me. Then the lights dimmed. An announcer stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen. The room became silent. Our keynote speaker built one of this year's fastest-growing consulting companies without relying on family wealth or corporate inheritance. Daniel's smile disappeared. The announcer continued. Please welcome Mr. Ethan Carter. The ballroom exploded with applause. I stood completely still. Daniel looked at me as if he had forgotten how to breathe. My parents stared in stunned silence. Marcus grinned from across the room. Sophia quietly whispered, "Go." I walked onto the stage. Every step felt heavier than the last. I looked across the audience. Then directly at my family. I've learned something this year, I began. Your last name can open doors. I paused. But your character decides whether people invite you back. The applause grew even louder. Daniel lowered his eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. That evening, as I left the conference, my phone rang. Olivia. Her voice sounded tighter than ever. Ethan, I've been reviewing Carter Holdings' financial records. What happened? I found transactions that don't make sense. How bad? She took a slow breath. Worse than I feared. My heart pounded. Someone has hidden millions of dollars, and I think the theft has been going on for years. You're trying to steal my company. Daniel's voice echoed through the courthouse hallway before the hearing even began. Reporters turned their cameras toward us. I stopped walking. I haven't taken anything from you. He pointed a finger at my chest. You planned this from the beginning. No. You hid behind Grandpa's death. I respected Grandpa. You manipulated everyone. I shook my head. You don't even know the truth. Dad stepped beside Daniel. You've embarrassed this family enough. Mom looked at me with tears in her eyes. Please stop fighting your brother. I almost laughed. My brother sued me. Neither of them answered. The courtroom doors opened. Bailiff, someone called, everyone inside. The room fell silent as the judge entered. Daniel's attorney stood first. Your Honor, Mr. Ethan Carter is attempting to seize control of Carter Holding using documents that were intentionally hidden from the rightful heirs. The judge looked toward Olivia. Your response? She stood calmly. The defense would like to submit page 2 of William Carter's legally certified will into evidence. The courtroom erupted with whispers. Daniel frowned. What page? Dad turned toward Olivia. There was only one page. She looked directly at them. No. There were always two. She handed the document to the judge. I watched my parents' faces slowly lose their confidence. The judge read silently for several moments. Then he looked up. This appears authentic. Daniel jumped to his feet. That's impossible. The judge frowned. Sit down, Mr. Carter. Daniel reluctantly obeyed. Olivia spoke again. This case involves more than inheritance. She turned toward the witness stand. The defense calls James Holloway. James walked forward looking pale. He avoided everyone's eyes while taking the oath. Olivia asked quietly, Mr. Holloway, did you alter Carter Holdings' financial records? His hands trembled. Yes. A gasp spread across the courtroom. Dad stood halfway from his seat. James. The judge struck the bench with his gavel. Order. Olivia continued. Who instructed you to falsify those records? James closed his eyes. I was told to do it. By whom? A long silence filled the room. Then he whispered one name. Daniel. Every camera immediately turned toward my brother. Daniel slammed his hand against the table. He's lying. James shook his head. I kept copies. You betrayed me. I protected you for years. Dad stared at Daniel in disbelief. Mom began crying quietly. Olivia wasn't finished. Your Honor, the defense has one final piece of evidence. She picked up a small flash drive. My client had never seen this recording until after William Carter's death. The courtroom lights dimmed. Grandpa appeared on the screen. He looked tired but peaceful. If you're watching this, he began, my family has already revealed exactly who they are. Nobody moved. He looked straight into the camera. Page 1 was never my final decision. My heartbeat quickened. It was a test. The room became completely silent. I wanted to know who would defend Ethan when they believed he had nothing. I saw my father lower his head. My mother covered her mouth. Grandpa continued. Greed always removes its mask when money enters the room. Daniel stared at the floor. If you celebrated Ethan's exclusion. Grandpa paused. Then you failed the only inheritance that truly mattered. The video ended. Nobody spoke. Even the reporters looked stunned. The judge slowly removed his glasses. This court has heard enough to recognize that additional evidence may significantly affect this case. He looked toward the clerk. I am ordering every remaining sealed document connected to William Carter's estate to be opened immediately. The courtroom became so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. The clerk broke the final seal. I followed the documents as they were placed before the judge. He adjusted his glasses and began reading. After several long minutes, he looked up. The Carter Legacy Trust legally transferred controlling voting rights of Carter holding to Ethan Carter 10 years ago. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The judge continued. Page 2 became effective only if the conditions described by William Carter were fulfilled. I looked toward my parents. My father's face had turned completely pale. My mother stared at the papers as if they belonged to someone else. Daniel suddenly stood. This is insane. The judge didn't even look at him. The documents are valid. Daniel slammed both hands on the table. I'm the CEO. Olivia answered calmly. You were. The word echoed through the room. You never controlled the company, she continued. You only believed you did. I closed my eyes for a second. Grandpa had been right. Truth always arrived eventually. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded everyone before we reached the steps. Microphones filled the air. Mr. Carter, did your family know about Page 2? How long have you controlled the company? Will you remove your brother permanently? I didn't answer. Daniel did. This is a conspiracy. A reporter immediately asked, then why did the judge validate every document? Daniel couldn't respond. His silence said everything. Within an hour, every business channel carried the same headline. Hidden heir revealed. Grandfather's secret will changes everything. Golden Son never controlled Carter Holding. The board of directors called an emergency meeting that afternoon. I attended through a secure video conference. Daniel looked exhausted. One director spoke first. Mr. Carter, because of the court's findings and the financial misconduct under your leadership, we are holding an immediate vote. Daniel looked around the room. You can't do this. Another director answered quietly. We already have. The voting results appeared on the screen. Unanimous. Daniel was removed as CEO. His remaining executive authority disappeared seconds later. He stared at the screen in disbelief. You all betrayed me. An older board member shook his head. No. You betrayed this company. Daniel disconnected without another word. Later that evening, I walked toward my car outside the courthouse. Please. My mother's voice stopped me. I turned slowly. She and my father stood together. Neither of them looked anything like the confident people I had seen during the will reading. Dad took one hesitant step forward. Ethan. I waited. I was wrong. Those 3 words should have healed me. Instead, they reminded me how long I had waited to hear them. Mom wiped away tears. We didn't know. I finally spoke. You never wanted to know. Neither of them argued. Dad lowered his head. We judged you. Mom whispered, can we please talk? I looked at both of them. I saw regret, pain, shame. But I also remembered the applause. I remembered being told I deserved nothing. I remembered leaving Grandpa's funeral completely alone. I'm not ready. I opened my car door. Ethan. I didn't turn around. I drove away without looking back. The next morning, I arrived at my office before anyone else. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Someone was already sitting in the reception area. My father. Alone. Waiting for me. My father was sitting in my office before I even unlocked the conference room. The strongest man I had ever known looked exhausted. His eyes were red. His shoulders were slumped. When he saw me, he stood slowly. Ethan. I didn't answer. I know I don't deserve your time. No, I said quietly. You don't. He nodded without arguing. I still need to say something. I placed my briefcase on the table. You have 5 minutes. He took a deep breath. I spent your whole life comparing you to Daniel. The words hit harder than I expected. I kept thinking confidence meant leadership. He looked at the floor. I never stopped to notice your kindness. I stayed silent. I rewarded the loudest voice. Another painful pause. And ignored the strongest character. My chest tightened. I kept trying to prove myself. I know. I thought if I worked harder. I know. I thought one day you'd finally be proud of me. He closed his eyes. I already should have been. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then he whispered the sentence I had wanted to hear since childhood. I'm sorry, son. The room suddenly felt very small. Before I could answer, another voice came from the doorway. Ethan. My mother stood there holding her purse with both hands. Her eyes were filled with tears. I asked security to let me in. I looked at her without speaking. She walked closer. I owe you the truth. I crossed my arms. I'm listening. She wiped her face. I knew your father was unfair. I felt my heart sink. You knew? She nodded. Every birthday. Every graduation. Every family dinner. I saw it. Then why didn't you stop it? Her voice broke. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? She looked ashamed. I wanted everyone to believe we were the perfect family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You chose appearances over me. Yes. The honesty hurt more than another lie would have. I failed you. Tears rolled down her face. I failed as your mother. I looked away. Part of me wanted to walk out. Part of me wanted to hug her. Instead, I simply stood there. Dad finally spoke again. We're not asking you to forget. Mom nodded. We're asking for a chance to become better. I took a slow breath. I forgive both of you. Hope appeared on their faces. Then I finished. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Their smiles disappeared. I can't pretend those years never happened. Dad lowered his head. I understand. I need time. Mom whispered, we'll wait. At least this time, they weren't making excuses. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. Daniel. I answered. What do you want? His voice was filled with anger. You destroyed everything. I told the truth. You stole my future. No. You wasted your own. He laughed bitterly. Mom and Dad turned against me because of you. They finally saw reality. I'll never apologize. I wasn't expecting one. He hung up. For the first time, I realized I no longer needed his approval. Or anyone else's. As I looked out the office window, someone knocked softly on my open door. Olivia stepped inside carrying a small sealed envelope. She smiled gently. Your grandfather left one final letter. She carefully placed it in my hands. He said you weren't ready to read it until today. I looked at the final envelope for several minutes before opening it. My hands weren't shaking from fear this time. They were shaking from gratitude. I slowly unfolded Grandpa's letter. Dear Ethan, it began. If you've reached this moment, then you've already won. I smiled sadly. You always knew, I whispered. I kept reading. Page 2 was never created to make you rich. I stopped for a second. That single sentence changed everything. Money can be inherited. Character cannot. My eyes filled with tears. Your brother inherited wealth without responsibility. You inherited responsibility because you earned it. Every painful memory suddenly made sense. The funeral. The applause. The rejection. Even the loneliness. Grandpa hadn't wanted me to suffer. He had wanted the truth to reveal itself. I continued reading. Anyone can receive a fortune. Very few people deserve to lead one. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. The final paragraph was underlined. Never build your future by proving someone else wrong. Build it by proving yourself right. I folded the letter carefully. I won't waste what you gave me. The next board meeting felt completely different. Every director expected me to rebuild Carter Holding exactly as it had been. One executive spoke first. Mr. Carter, what's your recovery plan? I looked around the room. We're not rebuilding the old company. Confused faces stared back at me. Another director frowned. What do you mean? The old culture rewarded fear. Silence. It rewarded favoritism. Nobody argued. It rewarded loyalty to people instead of principles. I took a deep breath. That ends today. One woman slowly nodded. So what's replacing it? Transparency. I looked around the table. Every promotion will be earned. I paused. Every financial decision will be audited. Another pause. And every employee will have the chance to be heard. The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then someone began clapping. Another followed. Within seconds, the entire board joined in. Not because I owned the company. Because they believed in the direction. Months passed. The culture slowly changed. People smiled more. Managers listened more. Profits returned without sacrificing honesty. For the first time, Carter Holding became the company Grandpa had dreamed about. My parents also changed. Not through dramatic speeches. Through small decisions. Dad called every Sunday. Not to discuss business. Just to ask how I was doing. Mom started inviting Marcus and Sophia to dinner because she wanted to know the people who had stood beside me when she hadn't. Trust didn't return overnight. It returned one honest conversation at a time. One evening, Dad quietly looked at me and said, "Thank you for giving us another chance." I answered honestly. "You still have to earn it." He smiled. "I know." And for once, that was enough. A few weeks later, I placed Grandpa's final letter inside the safe beside page 2. Neither document felt like treasure anymore. They felt like responsibility. As I locked the safe, I realized my greatest inheritance had never been a company. It had been a second chance to become the man Grandpa always believed I could be. 5 years later, carrying a single white rose, I walked toward Grandpa's grave. This time, I wasn't alone. I never thought we'd come back here like this. Sophia slipped her hand into mine as we stood before Grandpa's grave. 5 years had passed. Everything had changed. Yet seeing his name carved into the stone brought every memory rushing back. The funeral. The applause. The envelope. Page 2. I knelt and placed a single white rose beside the headstone. "I made it, Grandpa." Sophia smiled quietly. "I think he always knew you would." I laughed softly. So did everyone, except me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt peaceful instead of painful. On the drive to the cemetery, we had passed the new headquarters of my company. It had grown far beyond the small office Marcus and I rented years ago. Thousands of people worked there now. Not because of my last name. Because of a culture built on honesty. Marcus had become our chief operating officer. He still joked that our first office was better because the coffee was free. Sophia had become my partner in every sense of the word. Together, we built a business where respect mattered more than titles. Every success reminded me of Grandpa's final lesson. Character always lasts longer than money. The Carter Foundation had changed too. Instead of protecting wealth, it protected people. Scholarships. Housing programs. Emergency grants for struggling families. Every board meeting began with the same question. Who can we help next? That question mattered more than quarterly profits ever could. My parents visited often. Not because they wanted something. Because they wanted a relationship. Dad no longer introduced me as his successful son. He introduced me as the son who taught him humility. Mom spent weekends volunteering through the foundation. One afternoon she quietly admitted, helping strangers became easier after I learned how badly I had failed my own child. Healing wasn't instant. It was earned. One honest choice at a time. Daniel chose a different path. He never apologized. He blamed the court, the board, the investors, even Grandpa. Anyone except himself. Without trust, every opportunity disappeared. The greatest loss wasn't his position. It was the people who stopped believing him. Watching that happen taught me something important. Revenge wasn't necessary. Life eventually collected every unpaid debt. I reached into my jacket and removed Grandpa's final letter. The edges had become worn after years of reading it whenever I doubted myself. I smiled and slid it beneath the white rose. It belongs here now. Sophia squeezed my hand. You don't need it anymore. She was right. The words weren't inside the paper anymore. They were inside me. I looked at Grandpa's name one last time. You never gave me a company. I smiled through grateful tears. You gave me a chance to become the man you already believed I was. The wind gently moved the rose. For a second, it almost felt like Grandpa was smiling back. I turned toward the path with Sophia beside me. Behind us rested page 2's final lesson. Ahead of us waited the future. As I walked away without looking back, I finally understood the truth my family had missed for so many years. The most valuable page in my grandfather's will was never about wealth. It was about becoming the son they had failed to see.